Now, when you're shooting Aerochrome for a YouTube video, you have to do it right. You can't just shoot Aerochrome, you have to do something special like be one of the first people with an Aerochrome video, or shoot it in an X-Pan. So for my Aerochrome video, I decided to take the interesting location angle and shoot my roll over the course of 2 days in Kyoto, Japan. The deed has been done. Aerochrome is loaded. Still need to wind down one more frame, but a yellow number 12. The filter case wrapped up. So what and how is this film, and why would Kodak develop such a strange film that can only really have artistic uses? It was actually made for technical purposes because it turns out seeing in infrared is very useful. One such case is the chlorophyll in plants, which reflects IR light really well, and then it can be used to detect disease in crops and forests. Or you can use it to tell man-made camouflage that mimics plants apart from real plants, and this is the reason the military actually funded Kodak's development of IR films in the 1940s. As for what this film is, Kodak and Ektachrome infrared, which are technically different films but behave in almost identical ways, so I'll consider them the same, are false color infrared films. So what is a false color infrared film? Well, in normal color films there are 3 layers, red, green and blue sensitive, which each release color dyes in the development process to produce a negative or positive image. A false color film changes which dyes are released for each color. Lomochrome purple is an example of this, where green tends to become purple. Now, an infrared false color film takes this one step further, and instead of just changing the dyes, it also changes what part of the spectrum each layer is sensitive to. So instead of red, green and blue layers, we get infrared, red and green sensitive layers with no blue sensitive layer. And this change is what makes foliage turn red and pink, because as the chlorophyll in the plant reflects near IR light, that layer in the film produces the dyes for the red colour in the final image. So anything that reflects infrared light turns red. The red sensitive layer turns green, and then the green layer turns blue. This causes all the colours to shift and creates very interesting looks like the bright red torii gates in the shrines turning yellow.
Thank you for using JR West.
So the shooting process for Aerochrome is a little odd. You have to use a yellow or orange filter if you want those sweet red foliage effects. The reason for this is that Aerochrome is only meant to be sensitive to infrared, red and green. However, that's an issue because all silver halide is blue sensitive by default. So using a yellow or orange filter will block the blue light coming through and screwing up the film's colour balance and lets you get that sweet infrared effect. Now the filter I used through all of this roll was a Tiffin Yellow number 12 and it seemed to work fine. You might ask, how did I get my hands on this insanely rare and expensive film? Well, a while back the Film Photography Project announced that they were doing a limited restock of the film in these canisters, which was cut down from a very limited supply, and honestly it might have actually run out by now. So when that email came through notifying me of a restock, I jumped online immediately to grab 2 rolls. Now another issue with this film is that it requires special handling in loading and developing. You have to load this film in the dark or very, very dim light. So I actually loaded mine in the hotel bathroom in Kyoto. Now the reason this is done is because the film is very sensitive to light leaks and the felt on the canister is not great at blocking IR light. So this can lead to light piping and can expose the film in the container. Also, a lot of automatic cameras use film counters with an IR LED which count the sprockets as they go by, and this can expose and destroy the film as it passes through the camera. Also, if you have a camera with a film window, that needs to be taped up as IR light can sneak in through the foam that way as well. Your best bet is to just use a simpler, more mechanical camera like an f3 without these features. But then once you've shot the film, the issues persist as getting it developed can be quite difficult. You need to find a lab that does E6 processing and is IR safe. A lot of labs actually use infrared scanners to check the film before and after development, which will destroy this film if they use certain types of IR scanners. Now the Film Photography Project recommends using the darkroom for development, but that's in America, and I'm not. So I actually processed it in my Jobo with the Fuji E6 kit and it worked fine. Turns out the Jobo tanks are perfectly infrared safe. Also, after development, I did notice that the film was quite thin, but it also dried extremely flat, like way flatter than most films, so it was actually very easy to scan. As for Aerochrome itself, it's always been a bit of an odd duck because it's only ever been used for really artistic purposes. It's not something you would use to hardcore document something. And this is why it has been used to create unique and very striking looks to people's work, like in 2009 when Irish photographer Richard Moss used this film to create the example of colour infrared photography in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in his works called Infra, and later on in his films called The Enclave. Aerochrome was used here to bring the invisible conflict to the visible, and it certainly makes the work stand out. Other works that used Aerochrome are Karim Sahai's documentation of North Korea, and Jimi Hendrix's Are You Experienced album cover, which was shot by Carl Ferris. This film has also created many album covers to create a sort of psychedelic visual to their images, and it certainly does that. So where does that leave Aerochrome? Well, in 2009, Kodak discontinued Aerochrome, and now it's extremely sought after, rare and very expensive. So the film photography project was probably the last trustworthy source of this film, and there isn't many alternatives apart from getting extremely lucky and finding this in a freezer. Although there does seem to be kind of one true alternative I can find, which is a special filter from Vision that is designed for use on a full spectrum converted camera that can capture infrared light. So if you want to recreate Aerochrome digitally, you're going to need a full spectrum camera and a filter like this, or maybe some other crazy Photoshop techniques. Now, if you change the colors with a LUT or preset to get the effect of Aerochrome, it doesn't recreate the effect correctly because it's relying on infrared light, which modified cameras can't see. Another option is to use trichrome photography with infrared film, and this does work fine, but the process is fiddly at best with all the different filters and getting the images to align and keeping the color balance correct, so it can be quite difficult. Of course, the ultimate option would be for Kodak to bring back Ektachrome infrared. Now, maybe in the future we could see an E100 infrared, but for that to become reality, I need to do my part. You have 2 lives on your conscience now, Kodak. Also, if anyone suggests that Lomochrome Purple is not a replacement for Aerochrome, it's just shit. What you gonna do? Yeah, you know what that is, don't you? Hey, 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 hey. That's my leg you're nipping.